certainly so extended in some possible worlds. Maybe even we'll have future technology where you've got a, wherever in your brain, whatever it is, the global workspace or the relevant quantum computation is implemented, maybe we'll take it out of the brain and put it on your belt. Those little bits of, the right kinds of radio transmitters between your belt and your brain, and then maybe you'll have extended consciousness on your belt. Still, that's science fiction right now, whereas one thing that's interesting about the extended mind was it wasn't meant to require science fiction cases, but just the kinds of things and the kinds of video technology that we already have. So in practice, can you get extended consciousness? Here I'll just say that, on my view, there's no analog of the Inga-Otto case that gives prima facie support to extended consciousness in non-science fiction cases. Why is that is a really interesting question, but it may be because I think the physical basis of consciousness, unlike belief, requires especially direct and high bandwidth processing of information that you just can't get out of these perceptually mediated connections. As they stand, requires this kind of really high bandwidth processing that right now works best within the brain. Now, maybe some future technology makes that possible with extended systems, then all bets are off. I mean, to support extended cases, I think a proponent has to really exhibit what philosophers call twin cases, two intrinsic twins with different mental states. So you can get that going in the Otto case. Otto and twin Otto, who are intrinsic twins with different things written in the notebook. 51st Street on one hand, 53rd Street here, 51st Street there. They're twins before they read the notebook. They have different beliefs. What we would need for consciousness is Otto and twin Otto, twins with different phenomenology. All I'll say here is that a couple of people have tried things like that, Susan Hurley, Alvin Noe, and so on. I don't think the arguments those people have given for extended consciousness yield the kind of twin cases that you would need to get truly extended consciousness, and therefore they suggest a weaker dependence of consciousness on action than you would want for what counts as extended consciousness in the truly, in the strong sense. So anyway, the extended mind picture then, to wrap up, I think is an independently attractive view of the mental. It's a valuable alternative perspective, at least, which can enrich our understanding of human cognition. Now, I think the proof of it is ultimately in the pudding, in the explanatory power we get from adopting the extended perspective. And here I really do recommend looking at Andy's book, Supersizing the Mind, for really trying to do that kind of work, demonstrating the explanatory power of the thesis of this in cognitive science and in everyday life. I do think that, this isn't just philosophy. You might think, well, who cares how we classify this stuff? Whether we call this a belief or not. I think this perspective is actually going to become more and more important and relevant as things like information technology, media technology, computation in general becomes more and more important and ubiquitous in our life. How we think about these cases, I think, has consequences, educational consequences, social consequences, moral consequences. I mean, think about education and examination, open book tests. Is an open book test okay? Is it okay to use your calculator? Well, I think it depends what you're testing. You're testing the skin on the skull, and you're testing the extended cognitive system. And that comes down to, well, am I going to have the books later on when I need this information? Am I going to have the iPhone later on when I'm using this information? As an engineer, will I be using a calculator? If so, test the extended system. The extended system is the relevant system here. And if not, test the Cartesian system. So but I think the extended perspective really militates towards a certain view there. Social perspectives, maybe certain things that we right now conceive of as communication with others and certain kinds of interaction should really be reconceived as certain kinds of cognition. Certain forms of group discussion, for example, could be reconceived as kinds of cognition. Even moral consequences. If someone steals my iPhone, as in fact somebody did last year in the sad fate of my iPhone 3G. Normally we would conceive of that as a pretty nasty thing to do to someone, a form of theft. If this thesis is right, it's actually something much worse than a form of theft. I mean, it's actually a particularly nasty form of assault on my cognitive system, like reaching in and giving me some brain trauma. And that was really actually what it felt like for a day or so here. Actually, I lost the batteries ran down in my iPhone. I was seriously feeling a whole lot dumber there for a while, so I found a charging cable which recharged my cognitive system. Anyway, so one final key question to leave you with is one thing people won't worry about here is, will computer technology serve to diminish our cognitive capacities or to enhance them? People ask this question, is Google making us dumber? Because we're relying on Google so much. Well, if I'm right about this stuff, I think, there's some reasons for optimism here. Google isn't actually making us dumber. It's making us a whole lot smarter. And in fact, that's in fact, you know, the way I feel, at least about my relation to Google. And so I actually enhance cognitive capacities here. Maybe that's underlying delusional pathology, but I do think the extended perspective at least offers the hope of a positive answer here. So thank you very much.
Thanks very much. We're running a little late. Let's just have maybe one or two questions. Let me ask, if we have quantum consciousness, then for extended consciousness, we would only need to entangle with a device like a quantum iPhone, which is probably coming out in a few years. Is that right?
Absolutely.
Over here.
Everything you said.
Yeah. I want to go back to Otto and Inga's case and the claim that they are both disposed to to have these memories or contents. Because I think that perhaps this example actually shows a significant disanalogy. I think that Otto is actually disposed to have this content, but at one remove. So to me, it seems that it's more like that is, he made arrangements to be disposed, but. And I want to connect it to things that you touched on, such as the issue of intrinsic content, and the fact that you actually have to perceive, the content of the notebook to make it his own. Because I think that the difference here is in the dynamics. Basically, for Otto, the notebook is a dead thing. It's an inanimate thing. It doesn't do anything in and of itself, whereas for Inga, it's supposedly stored in some dispositional clusters. Hence, it can actually make some spontaneous activity, even while he doesn't consult it. And that seems like a very significant difference. And I wonder what's your response to that?
The fact that the iPhone is not dynamic?
Yes, it's not dynamic. It doesn't do anything, and he actually has to. So to me, it seems more natural to think that Otto is just disposed. He just makes arrangements for him to be able to have, to have some kind of disposition. Whereas for English, it doesn't have.
I mean, we can make all kinds of arrangements about our own relation to our biological memory. We can arrange to get into environments where we'll be reminded of certain things, and all kinds of people with various disorders, in fact, rely on these kinds of arrangements all the time. I don't think the mere fact that you need to make arrangements for memory retrieval does anything much to show they're not part of your mind. The statics versus dynamics point, just so we find out that people on Mars have I think the status of our biological memory is active versus static is something which is already widely debated in the human case. But just say it does turn out that biological memory is such that it's largely static until the point of retrieval, and then there's this very quick dynamic reconstructive process. Do we then say that it wasn't part of belief or it wasn't part of memory? That just seems like the wrong verdict. That's an open empirical question: to what extent it's static or dynamic, and perhaps an important distinction for some theoretical purposes. But static versus dynamic, status of this information doesn't appear to be the kind of thing that could or ought to be. What makes the difference between being part of the mind or not? It's consistent with being a mind that not every part of the mind be active at a given moment. Of course, you can also go towards extended minds with active iPhones if you want, if you want the extended mind to be dynamic. So that would be consistent with the case. It would require improving the technology of it.
I know you didn't consult your iPhone to answer that question.
Yeah, that was why it was so bad.
You spoke of two barriers. One is the skin barrier, and the second is knowledge versus belief. But I'd like to bring in a third barrier, which is knowledge versus information. What the notebook contains is information as distinct from knowledge. Otto already knows that there is a museum. He knows it's on a street, and he knows that he can get there by a taxi. All he needs is the number 50.